Rattlesnakes are full of surprises. At their rear end, they have a noisy apparatus which distracts enemies and causes them to strike at their tails instead of their heads, where their brains and their fangs are. As with other snakes, they have no noses and smell with their tongues. So, when you see a snake gliding across the grass, his tongue darting ahead of him, he is not trying to frighten you. He is merely taking the air. The most surprising thing about these creatures, however, is their capacity for love. When they mate, the male inserts his vivid penis, which resembles two bulbs stuck together, into the female, and they stayed wrapped around each other for 9 whole days. During this period, they seek neither for food nor water, nor they do appear to excrete, for they have common orifice called the cloaca, which houses both their genitals and their organ of excretion. Using the orifice for one function precludes their using it for the other. Such commitment to love is difficult to find anywhere. When mating is done, the penis is withdrawn into cloaca and it becomes impossible to distinguish male from female. This story, however, is not about reptiles. It's about humans. It is a story of Ganesh and Jita. Ganesh resembled the elephant god of his name. He was a stock fellow, with a low hairline and enormous nose that led his face. Jita, on the other hand, was a song beautiful and slender as a note played on a single reed instrument. They were the most improbable of couples. At the time when Ganesh and Jita lived, man believed in God and God believed in man. That is to say, God deceived man at every turn, played cruel tricks on him, but nevertheless called on man to serve his unknowable purpose. Like the people around them, Ganesh and Jita were Hindus, devout Hindus. They believed in cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, the spiral of karma, which if you live your life correctly, carried you upwards towards everlasting enlightenment, but if you didn't, dragged you down to the level of beasts. As soon as they set eyes on each other, and much to their dismay, Ganesh and Jita fell in love. There was an eye-evading, flower-throwing love that culminated in daydreams and poetry. It was a love that demanded sweat and smells sticky secretions and exchange of unfavorable body fluids. Even with God around, this would have been all right, except for one thing. They were married, but not to each other. As a young lad, Ganesh had married the bride appointed by his parents, and he couldn't complain about the girl chosen for him. Vasantha was as light and sprightly as spring rain. Jita had done likewise, and her man, Prem, was a model of propriety and husbandly love. So, they had no reason, no excuse, no case that even a Californian court would countenance to find each other. But find each other they did. And when they did, they couldn't believe what they had found. It seemed absurd that flesh could sing so sweetly that time stopped. Incredible that the circumscribed pleasures of Eros could make them cling to each other for days, night, and days again, dripping, dancing, and in positions that would have made between them like swing of the sea. But they were good Hindus, religious folk, and like all religious folk, they questioned what God intended by causing them to come together. Joyfulness could never be its own reward.
God is telling us that a child wants to be born. He is telling us that out of unformed elements of the universe, a life is crying out for an existence. We are the vehicles of the purpose.
Then why not a child from you and Vasanta? Or one from me and Prem? That would be proper and would not offend the code of Dharma.
They questioned even as they clung to each, questioned even when breathless with pleasure. But questions unanswered are more damaging than those attended to. They erode joy, interrupt ecstasy. Once, even before the ebb of their pleasure was complete, Ganesh suggested, in the touching but somewhat stupid way that elephants have.
It could be that astrologers were wrong when they matched the horoscopes. It could be that we were designed for each other and would be husband and wife, but for a man's his reading of the stars.
Jiro was not satisfied with this. She was a song, and songs, as we all know, work in a roundabout way. So, even as she rejoiced in her love for Ganesh, she searched for its true meaning, worried about its significance. Then, as though God had intended it, she found in a magazine an article on rattlesnakes.
It is clear that in our past existence, we were rattlesnakes. Some memory of this remains. That is why we are as we are. You and I have been good Hindus. We have, except from this one transgression, obeyed all the dictates of Dharma. All God can do to punish us from our present failing is to return us to our former state. When we are born again, we will be born as rattlesnakes. And is that not what we really want? How can we be sure? But we have to trust in God. And to return as rattlesnakes, we must die now and go back to our former lives.
Kill ourselves, you mean?
Yes.
At their birth, the astrologer had warned that water would be dangerous to them and they should never go near it. Because of this, neither had learned to swim. The astrologer was, of course, right. Water is, indeed, dangerous to non-swimmers. Ganesh and Jita drowned. desert in Arizona is hot and arid. The air is so dry that human skin flakes and becomes like scales. Gita was glad that she was a snake. Dawn was beginning to break, and Jira had almost given up hope when she found him. He was lying against a rock. She shot out her tongue to get the male smell that would make her orifice damp and the eggs in her belly churn. Nothing happened. But she knew it was Ganesh, her Ganesh. So she slithered across and began wrapping herself across his body. Ganesh seemed disturbed by her action, almost ashamed, but Jira was not put off by this. He had always been a little shy. She pressed her damp orifice against his and began the gentle gyration that would cause his penis to protrude. She couldn't wait for the ball of gristle to spring out and lock into her opening. Nothing emerged. She flicked out her tongue to smell him again. There was no sharp male smell about him. Instead, the odor she got was exactly the same as that which came from her own body. As karma promised, they had been reborn as rattlesnakes, but as female rattlesnakes. As always, God has the last laugh.